How many of the new adventures have you read?
I've read quite a few, but not so many anymore. There's 24 of them a year. That's too bloody many. I've never wanted 24 new Doctor Who adventures a year in my life. 6 was a perfectly good number.
But Doctor Who was on 46 weeks of the year in the Hartnell era.
Yes, but did you see the pace of those shows? They were incredibly slow. Really hideous. I dearly loved Doctor Who, but I don't think my love of it translated into it being a tremendously good series. It was a bit crap at times, wasn't it?
You've pointed out in the past there's a certain nobility about Doctor Who as classic children's serial and kitsch, deep camp.
If you judge on what they were trying to do, that is create a low-budget, light-hearted children's adventure serial for tea time, it's bloody amazingly good. If you judge it as a high-class drama series, it's falling a bit short. But that's not what it was trying to be.
I think Doctor Who of the 60s was simply of its time. Other shows were just as slow.
If you look at other stuff from the 60s, they weren't crap, it was just Doctor Who. The first episode of Doctor Who betrays the lie that it's just the 60s, because the first episode is really good, the rest of it's shit.
The reason why it's so good is they had months of lead-up time to it. After that it was weekly.
That's fair enough, but the rest is still bad.
But that's like comparing a serial with a one-off play from the same era. Fanboys put Doctor Who up against Claudius. There's a certain macho quality to a lot of fan recognition of the show which says yes. It's up there with Shakespeare, but if you put it up against Claudius, there are amazing similarities. Claudius took place entirely on studio sets. Everyone wore stupid costumes, talked in mock Shakespearean speech.
And it had a brilliant script and a cast of brilliant actors. These are two things we cannot say in all forgiveness about Doctor Who. There have been times when some people have thrown out on the quality of the dialogue. Much as I dearly love it.
You're willing to recognize its limitations?
Yeah. I still think all the Peter Davison stuff stands up.
I'm sorry, but I hated the Davison era.
How could you? I'm talking retrospectively now, when I look back at Doctor Who now. I laugh at it, fondly. As a television professional, I think, how did these guys get a paycheck every week? Dear God, it's bad. Nothing I've seen of the black and white stuff, with the exception of the pilot, the first episode, should have got out of the building. They should have been clubbing those guys to death. You've got an old guy in the lead, who can't remember his lines. You've got Patrick Troughton, who was a good actor, but his companions, how did they get their equity card? Explain that. They're unimaginably bad. Once you get to the color stuff, some of it's watchable, but it's laughable. Mostly now, looking back, I'm startled by it. Given that it's a children's show, and a tea time show, I think the Peter Davison stuff is well constructed, the characters are consistent.
They're consistently crap. One-dimensional and cardboard.
That's true, but if you can point at one example of melodrama where that's not true, I'd be grateful. Peter Davison is a better actor than all the other ones. That's the simple reason why he works more than all the other ones. There is no sophisticated, complicated reason to explain why Peter Davison carried on working and all the other doctors disappeared into a retirement home for laddies. He's better, and I think he's extremely good as a doctor. I recently watched a very good Doctor Who story, one I couldn't really fault. It was Snackadance. Sure, it was cheap, but it was beautifully acted, well written. There was a scene in it where Peter Davison has to explain what's going on. The Doctor always has to. Now some drunk old laddie like Tom Baker would come on to a sudden, shuddering halt in the middle of the set, and stare at the camera, because he can't bear the idea that someone else is in the show. But Peter Davison is such a good actor, he managed to panic on screen for a good 2 minutes, so he had you sitting on the edge of your seat, thinking, God, this must be really bad. He shrills and shrieks and fails around marvelously. And he's got the most boring bunch of lines to say, and I'm thinking, oh no, this guy's wetting himself. We're in real trouble.
The defining factor for our critics seems to be how, like bad television, is it? It really pisses me off. There was a review in TV Zone recently of Kate Orman's new book which was entirely based on that premise. How like bad television is this book?
But that's not what you want. My memories of Doctor Who are based on bad television that I enjoyed at the time. It could get me really burned saying this, but Doctor Who is actually aimed at 11-year-olds.
What about the Honor Blackman Avengers? That was early 60s, weekly, black and white, and that had great visual style and great direction. In An Unearthly Child, where is Hussein does fades between scenes and other things that wouldn't reappear in Doctor Who for nearly 10 years.
Don't you think it's fair to say Doctor Who was a great idea that happened to the wrong people? Most of the people working on it were on their way to do something else. They wanted to do something else.
Sounds like the new adventures.